Welcome to Man vs. Weed, the Cannabis Review Podcast, where we blow smoke, just not up your ass. I'm Tango Hotel Charlie, your host. Thanks for joining me. Roll it up, light it up, eat your edibles, crush a dab, whatever you want to do. Quick summary. I'm a weed nerd, my wife isn't. She picks the strain, I smoke it. Then I give you a little info on the LP, and finally I review the strain my wife Robin picked for me. Follow me at Street Villain if you like what you hear, and maybe tell another weed lover in your life to check me out. So today's strain is going to be Wappa from Redecan. Robin picked it because it had a funny name. She's right. Say it, it's fun to say. Wappa. Sounds like a hamburger. The THC looked high, and the price was on the lower end at $7.99 a gram plus tax. Redecan has been around since the beginning of legalization. Back then, they ran into a few problems. Cannabis legalization began on October 17, 2018. Their very first batch of Bubba Urkel cookies was shipped to stores containing visible white mold. Customers reported bad customer service and were refused a refund on open cannabis. So I guess they were supposed to determine that it was moldy before they took it out of the box, and then took it out of the jar, and then broke the seal. Idiots. At first, they just claimed it was ordinary organic material, and then they eventually recalled it and downplayed the whole situation. Here's a pro tip. If you want to record less complaints, just create a customer service system that's so unusable that nobody wants to complain. Temple tap. Also, many folks didn't think it would happen or just didn't notice the mold. Those people would have just smoked it. Some of those folks probably got on the internet and gave it a glowing review afterwards. But other folks with compromised immunities and such could have gotten very sick from smoking that mold, and some probably did. Meanwhile, these companies were marketing themselves as the far cleaner and safer option to the black market, the dangerous black market. But some folks could have gotten very sick from smoking mold-tainted cannabis. At the same time, these companies act like legal cannabis is the only safe cannabis. Then, less than a week later, customers started flooding Reddit with images of bugs in their weed from Redecan. When they contacted that customer service again, they were refused refunds and told those bugs were protein carbohydrates? What? Yep, you heard me right. Protein carbohydrates. So for those keeping score, mold is just ordinary organic material, and bugs are protein carbohydrates. As is the case, they eventually admitted to the bugs, but claimed they were beneficial insects. Wait, what is going on here? Did you know there is no time limit as to when an LP must stop spraying with approved pesticides? So they can just keep spraying right up until harvest? Did you know that if a pesticide is approved, it is not tested for? Some of these sprays are made with fungus spores. For example, one of these sprays is called Press Top. Press Top is made from spores from the fungus Gliocladium catenulatum. It is a fungivore that takes over quickly, eating other fungus. It eats other fungus. However, this spray contains sucralose and milk. You know who also likes those things? Bugs. As a result, it is not uncommon for farmers to then introduce other predatory bugs to feed on unwanted pests that show up to eat that spray. Oh, and the Gliocladium? Well, when it spreads, it shows itself as a white mold. Sound familiar? So far, we have white mold and beneficial insects, and they're both A-OK with Health Canada. But what is a corner-cutting LP to do with a bunch of moldy cannabis, you say? Well, you just irradiate that shit to kill all the fungus-based spray they applied to it. Only sometimes it doesn't kill all the mold. But they have followed all of Health Canada's guidelines and claim that the bugs and mold detected are just part of the approved pesticide. Remember how I said they don't look for approved sprays? Well, there you go. Pack that shit in a jar, then put that jar in a box, and send that shit out to your grandma when she's just trying to relieve her arthritis. So while I know all this, my sweet unsuspecting wife didn't. She walked in and saw those two things, THC content and a funny name, Wappa. Now, I've heard a lot of good things about Wappa and was excited to try it. I have been told by reputable folks that they have changed their ways since 2018 when they had these problems, and have gotten much better. Many reviews say the Wappa is great. The website says it was grown in a greenhouse under the Niagara sun. It was fed nothing but fresh water, sunshine, and a watchful eye. Well, that, fungivores, and beneficial insects. Proteins, carbohydrates, whatever you want to call them. Redecan is family owned with 30 years agricultural experience. Wappa is an evergreen strain that is expertly cured and hand-trimmed. I'm not sure what evergreen strain means exactly, but it's definitely one of them, according to the website. It is skunky and fruity with large dense green and purple flowers. The THC in Wappa is stated to be 19 to 25%. Now this is the part where I'd normally tell you about its terpene profile. However, the Cannabis Store website and the Redecan site each had a completely different list of terpenes with a completely different set of numbers, leading me to believe that they're both completely bullshit. So I won't bother, except to tell you that the top three on the cannabis site were carophyllene, myrcene, and linalool, while on the Redecan site were terpene, caryophyllene, and guaiacol. Finally, it's also an indica-dominant hybrid strain. Okay, so my typical 1 gram purchase came in a box. Inside the box was a giant plastic jar, but what's weird about that is it is large just for the sake of being large. And it's actually hollow in the bottom with a small compartment at the top where the cannabis sits in it. There's a childproof lid, and under that childproof lid is a seal. I mean, actual poison doesn't have this much safety precaution. Once I finally got in the jar, I was immediately greeted with a sad pile of stems and leaf attached to small pieces of bud. So much for large, dense purple-green buds. No smell jumped out at me, and I deliberately moved my nose closer and closer to the weed until I could smell it. 6 inches. Nope. 4 inches. 2 inches. Still no. Right up to the buds. Yes! Finally! But just barely. And even then it was just a musty, nondescript weed smell. There was no moisture pack and it was dry, despite being packaged fairly recently, late January of this year, which is only 2 months before this review. Under the microscope, the trichomes are cooked with radiation, but that is expected at this point. What is interesting is that the trichomes were all clear, no cloudy or amber. You see, as trichomes mature, their appearance changes. They start clear before becoming cloudy or milky, and then finally a golden amber color. Ideally, you want a mix of all of these, with the majority being cloudy. This maturity indicates the effect of the medicine. Clear means you didn't go long enough. Ambers mean you went too far. Cloudy is the Goldilocks zone. After grinding it up, it turned powdery and wasn't sticky at all. When I broke a piece with my finger, I caught a hint of something tangy and fruity, but that quickly went away. I can only assume that was the cannabis's soul, floating up the E-beam to terpene heaven. Because after that, it quickly went away and I never smelt it again. I rolled it in a raw original organic paper and fired her up. Right away, it was harsh on my throat and lungs, and it tasted very bitter. The ash burned black and gray, and there was a bitter chemical taste throughout the whole joint. The smoke was harsh, rough on your lungs, and left a bitter aftertaste in your mouth and throat. There could be any number of reasons why this happened, including improper flushing and sprays. But without knowing the exact details on what they did, I could only speculate. However, the taste, the ash, and the clear trichomes I can speak on, and those things would seem to indicate a lack of care and a rushed job. Since the only incentive for these folks is money, rushing out a subpar product is an all too tempting path for some. So I wanted to make sure I was doing clean science. So after smoking a joint of my own cannabis at 9 in the morning, I didn't use anything else all day until 3 o'clock when I smoked this joint of Wappa. That's 6 hours without smoking, dabbing, or eating edibles. Like I said, for science. So this entire gram joint had every opportunity in the world to impress me, to show me what it had, and all it had was a low to medium effect. Very mild. I'm not even sure it worked or if I was just still tasting that bitterness. Sometimes people describe weed as creeper, as it slowly builds, but this was more like a sneaker, as in, what little was there snuck away within 30 to 40 minutes. Overall, very disappointed in something I have heard is one of the good ones. If this is one of the good ones, then this podcast is going to be an uphill battle all the way. This muted effect is probably a direct result of the rushed harvest and radiated terpenes. So is this the one? Is this it? Sorry, Redecan. Wappa is not it. Maybe Cold Creek Kush will do better. Look for that in the future. Anyways, thank you everyone for taking the time out of your day to listen and participate in the polls and discussion. I really appreciate all the feedback. If you would like to take part, make sure to follow me at Street Villain. And if you would like to send me an email, it's manversusweedthc@gmail.com. Please subscribe, share, review, and as always, free the weed.